Hey everybody, welcome back to Life in the Forest with me, Katherine. If you have not been with us the last few weeks, my name is Katherine. I'm an AmeriCorps service member serving at the Vermont Land Trust. I serve at a really beautiful place called Bluffside Farm in Newport, Vermont. I work on outreach and education programming for the Vermont Land Trust, and I try to use the beautiful farm here as much as possible for all of the learning that I help happen. This week, we are going to talk about something a little bit different than we've been talking about. So we've been talking about trees, different types of common Vermont trees, and we have been kind of identifying them, talking about what's special about them. But this week, we're going to talk about what happens to trees after they're cut down, or if they die and just the stump is left or the trunk is left. What happens then? So come follow along, we're gonna have some fun. So think all the way back to episode 1, which I know seems like forever ago. We talked about the different layers of the forest. There was the canopy, the mid-story, the understory, and the floor. The floor is a really important part of the forest that sometimes can get overlooked because there's no big tall trees growing. But there are some other really interesting things. So we're going to talk more about the things that are on the forest floor today, and a lot of times that is the parts of dead trees. And we'll talk about all the interesting things that we can find there. So our big questions for today are: what happens to the trees that fall down or are cut down in the forest? And how do they add to the life in the forest? What can they add to the forest floor and to the entire forest overall? A tree stump may seem dead at first glance, but look closely. Where trees were once living is now a home to a lot of different creatures. Moss, lichen, and bugs can be found on tree stumps, as well as a lot of other plants. Over time, these creatures are helping to break down the stump that was once alive. This process is called decomposition. When something decomposes, it is decaying or breaking down. Creatures like fungus, bacteria, and invertebrates can help with this process. They consume the once living material and break it down even more. Then it goes back into the soil and becomes even richer, so that the forest can continue to grow strong and healthy. A fungus is a spore-producing organism that feeds on once living things. An example is a mushroom. Bacteria are microorganisms that have one cell. They're really small, so I couldn't really get a picture of one. Just know that they're definitely there in the tree stumps. Invertebrates are animals that don't have backbones like worms or snails. Remember, all of these tiny organisms play a huge part in breaking down dead trees to help the soil get richer. Downed trees can also be a great place for animals to find shelter and food. Here's a chipmunk I saw in the woods today as I was exploring. Animals will often find tree cavities or naturally formed holes in tree trunks that are partly closed. They can build nests in these holes or use them to find food. The tree trunk might be dead, but animals bring life inside them. What about trees that are dead but still standing? These trees are also great places for an animal to find shelter, and they can do great things for the plants and soil around it. When a dead or dying tree is still standing, it's called a snag. This snag looks like it might be home to some chickadees, and it is also doing a great job of holding soil together and stabilizing the ground for other plants and trees around it. How cool is this tree's roots? It looks like the tree is on stilts, and it kind of is. The mound of rocks and soil that the tree is on top of is a place where a different tree once fell. The wood and soil around it created this mound as it decomposed over time. Then a white birch started growing on top of that mound. Now its roots reach over the mound. This is an awesome example of a tree growing on top of a place where a fallen tree once was. Here's an example of a huge tree falling over and taking a ton of its roots with it. I wish you could stand here with me instead of just seeing it on the screen. The base of this tree was taller than I am. Even though the tree is dead and all of its roots were pulled from the ground when it fell, plenty of animals can nest in the little pockets of the uprooted tree trunk. Of course, living trees are a very special part of any forest. But today we learned about the other ways that trees can be important once they die or fall down. Remember, life in the forest is everywhere, and dead trees can help keep the forest in Vermont a diverse and unique place. Alright everyone, that's it for video 5. I hope that you learned a lot and really enjoyed this episode, and maybe it inspired you to look a little closer at the things that don't always get as much attention in the forest. Bye!